If you've ever felt a strange, heavy exhaustion from just existing in the digital age, you aren't alone. It's that subtle, persistent weight you feel when you realize that even in your most private moments, you're still somehow on. Maybe you've noticed that you can't just watch a movie or have a meal without the quiet, nagging urge to document it. Or perhaps you've found yourself editing a text message for 10 minutes, trying to strike the perfect balance between being casual and being understood. It doesn't look like a big deal to anyone else, but it says more about the architecture of your mind than you might realize. For the generation born between 1997 and 2012, being a digital native isn't just about knowing how to use technology. It's about the way technology has fundamentally reshaped the landscape of the human psyche. You are the first generation to grow up in a world where the curtain never truly closes. In previous generations, people had different versions of themselves, one for work, one for family, and one for their private thoughts. But for Gen Z, these boundaries haven't just blurred, they've effectively vanished. Psychologists call this context collapse. It's the sensation of being in a room where your boss, your parents, your high school friends, and total strangers are all standing together, watching you at the exact same time. Every post, every comment, and even your private digital footprints exist in a space where all these audiences overlap. This creates a unique kind of psychological tension. You aren't just living your life, you are managing a public persona in real time, often without even realizing you're doing it. This lack of boundaries leads to a specific behavioral pattern: hyper-vigilance. If you find yourself overthinking every social interaction or feeling a spike of anxiety when an old photo of you resurfaces, it's not because you're sensitive. It's because your brain is trying to navigate a world where your past, present, and future selves are all visible at once. You are forced to be the curator of your own history. This is also why Gen Z is often characterized by a high level of global empathy. Because you've grown up with the entire world in your pocket, you don't just feel the stress of your own life, you feel the collective weight of global crises, social movements, and the suffering of people thousands of miles away. It's a massive amount of emotional data for a single nervous system to process. When you feel overwhelmed by the news, it isn't a sign of weakness, it's a sign that your empathy has been scaled up to a global level before your internal defenses were ready to handle it. You are carrying the world's context alongside your own. And here is where it gets interesting. Often, critics suggest that this generation is obsessed with themselves because of the focus on social media and self expression. But the real reason isn't what most people think. It isn't about narcissism, it's about a desperate search for agency in a world that feels increasingly uncontrollable. But the real reason behind the aesthetic culture and the constant self labeling isn't vanity, it's about control. In a digital landscape where your identity can be fragmented and interpreted by anyone at any time, defining yourself, down to the most specific subculture or personality type, is a way to reclaim your narrative. You aren't showing off. You're trying to build a fortress around who you are so that the context collapse doesn't swallow you whole. This need for control manifests in smaller, quieter ways too. Think about the way Gen Z uses ironic or absurdist humor. When things feel too heavy or the digital performance feels too exhausting, humor becomes a shield. It's a way of saying, I know this is all a performance and I'm in on the joke. It's a psychological survival mechanism that allows you to participate in the digital world while maintaining a small, safe distance from its intensity. Identity for this generation has become a fluid project rather than a fixed destination. Because you are constantly receiving feedback from a global audience, your sense of self is being updated every single day. This creates a state of perpetual becoming. While older generations might have found themselves in their 20s and stayed there, Gen Z is psychologically wired to keep evolving. That can feel incredibly unstable, but it also allows for a level of authenticity and open-mindedness that was previously impossible. You are comfortable with the idea that a person can be many things at once. However, the cost of this fluidity is a deep-seated fear of being misunderstood or canceled. When your private self and public persona are one and the same, a mistake isn't just a mistake. It feels like a threat to your entire existence. This is why people-pleasing behaviors and the need for external validation are so prevalent. You aren't looking for likes. You're looking for confirmation that you're still okay in a world that never stops judging. Once you see this as a structural change in the way humans relate to one another, you can start to let go of the guilt. You realize that your anxiety isn't a personal failing. It's a natural response to an unnatural environment. You are navigating a psychological terrain that no humans have ever walked before. It was never random. The way you edit your life, the way you feel the world's pain, and the way you shield yourself with humor are all part of a pattern. It's the psyche's way of trying to find a home in a world where the walls have been replaced by glass. Understanding this doesn't mean the digital world gets any quieter, but it does mean you can stop blaming yourself for feeling the noise. Reflect on the moments where you feel most like yourself, not the version of you that is being viewed, but the version that is simply breathing, thinking, and feeling. That version still exists. It's just been buried under the weight of 1,000 different contexts. The boundary between your private and public self may have vanished, but your essence hasn't. It's just waiting for you to look inward instead of outward. And that awareness alone changes how you move through the world. It was never about being digital. It was always about being human in a space that doesn't always have room for humanity. Understanding yourself is the beginning of everything.